My name is Hemang Lahiru. I am the program director for PRISM Brain Mapping for India and for South Asia. It's been really exciting. We've got almost 60 odd registrations for this event today. So this is brilliant. This is actually one of our first programs that we're running for this year online. And it's been really amazing because we've done a few certification programs earlier, and the response on there has been very encouraging. And we just thought we will try, reaching out to a wider audience with an open session as well. So thank you everyone again for making the time to join in. We've seen a recent trend from most people, and this is the feedback that we get, from most of the people who are actually in the working environment. They tend to assume that they all start the days with the best laid plans, but the minute they log into Zoom or Teams or anything, and their entire planning goes in for a toss. So on basis of that anecdote, I'd like to set the scene for what we're looking at doing today. So this session on PRISM Brain Mapping, or Introduction to PRISM Brain Mapping, is to give you a little bit of an insight into behavior profiling. What's the latest in terms of what's happening with behavior profiling at the moment, and how does this affect us in the workplace? And I'm sure each one of you have had your own instances or your own experiences through which you've come through on this. What we would like to do is, if you have any questions, feel free to drop those questions in the Q&A box. If you have any observations as well, or if you wanted to make a point or something, again, drop in those those thoughts or those questions in the Q&A box. And what we will do is we will come back to that during the end of the session. We already have a lot of questions from delegates who've registered for the program. So we'll be taking those questions up towards the end as well. And basis of what we're discussing and what we're reviewing, if you have any other questions or follow-ups, then we can pick that up as well in the session. Also, as we mentioned, as a gesture of thank you for taking the time out to attend the session today, you will all be receiving a complimentary PRISM Brain Map link for you to take a PRISM inventory, get a feel for the tool, get your own tailor-made report for PRISM Brain Map, highlighting your behavior preferences. And what we will also be doing is you will get a 15-minute debrief, which will be completely complimentary as well, just explaining the map to you, taking you through the different sections. So keep watching your email for the link, as well as a recording of this program. So that's what you will find relevant is just some statistics to set the scene. To say that a recent study, which was actually published, and this was actually in 2019, before the whole pandemic kicked off. And what that study actually found was that when companies make a hiring decision, and this is not only when they're looking at new employees coming into the system, they're also looking at promoting people from within the system. They found that 46% of the employees fail to reach their full potential, and only about 19% are able to achieve complete success in the job that they do. And the study went on to probe that, because that's a huge number. When we look at the amount of time and effort that companies put in for appraisals, that they put in towards the recruitment programs, and to recruit someone or to promote someone after all that time, and then to see that only 20% of them are being successful, that was really an eye-opener. And what the study found was that it wasn't the technical skills that affected the success of the people, but it was actually the interpersonal skills. How did they actually get on with other people is what really made a difference in terms of success or failure in that particular role. In fact, it went on to say that 80% of the staff turnover, whether it is through appraisals or it is new hires, can be attributed to mistakes or gaps, that kind of came through at the time of recruitment. And just kind of building on there, going and digging a bit deeper into the reasons behind this. If you look at it, a higher percentage of reason why this did not work was primarily because of the interpersonal skills, or what we call as the softer skills. And only 11% was because the candidate was missing the necessary technical skills. And this is really an eye-opener, because if we look at it from a company's perspective, or an organization's perspective, the gap in the profitability, or factors which affect profitability, the same study goes on to highlight, to say that, okay, look, what is the leakage from a profitability perspective, from a business's point of view? And astoundingly, a major part of this wheel comes in on the softer side. Things like productivity of the employees, the morale of the employees, the opportunity cost when you're bringing somebody new on board, ineffective communication, teams not working well together. And this was really, really interesting, because what happens in a work environment or in a professional environment, whether you're meeting a client or whether you're meeting someone as a prospect or whether you're interacting with colleagues, very often we address or we work with people based on what we see of them or what are the observed behaviors. We seldom have the time or the inclination at times to dwell into what is really driving that particular behavior. So, what are the values of the person? What are the beliefs? What are the experiences? Because when you're interacting with someone, all you're getting is first impressions based on, where they've what their degrees are or what their work experiences are and things like that. But you're not actually able to dwell deeper to figure out, to say that, okay, look, what's really driving this kind of a behavior? And the study goes on to build that if we look at the factors that drive success for people, 15% of the success we're not saying that technical skills are not important. But what we are saying is that technical skills in a particular domain will only get you that far. So for instance, if you're hiring for a job at Google, when you get into Google, all the other people who've been hired with you at that same, in that same job have more or less the same technical skills. It's not going to set you apart. But once you're there, what will take you to the next level is your ability to work with other people, managing the other people's, behaviors and kind of, leading them. Just purely technical skills will only result in success in a nominal 15% of the cases. And this is really amazing, because when we look at the amount of time that we invest in getting those technical skills, it's almost an inverted pyramid. I mean, for most people, they've spent almost 15, 20 years of their life getting the technical skills. If we add the schools, the college, the postgraduate, the certification programs that you would get, all of that would probably add up to a nice chunk of organized study for 15 to 20 years of your life. And for some people, it could be even higher when they go on to get a PhD or multiple degrees in that, subject. However, when we contrast it with how much time we invest in kind of, building our people skills or our ability to work with other people, in terms of the time, to say that it gets reversed is a bit more generous, because for a lot of us, it may not even be that much in terms of the time that we're spending to acquire those people skills. And when we look at it to say that the amount of influence that it has in terms of the success, it kind of helps us to crystallize those problems that we saw before, to say that why is it that it's only 20% of people who are achieving that success? and a remainder of the people, despite the best intentions, are not able to cross that threshold. And there is something in here which kind of points us in that direction. And what we can kind of say is that now technical and job related skills are a must. They are an entry criteria. So if you wanted to be a pilot, if you wanted to be a surgeon, if you wanted to be a programmer, if you wanted to get into HR or finance even, having the technical skills is an entry criteria. But it is not sufficient when it causes you to go up the ladder. So if you're looking at progressing, either within the role or within the organization or in your business, you will need something extra in addition to your technical skills that will set you apart. And it is that understanding, so a lot of times people tend to think, what could that be? What is that X factor? What is it that's going to set us apart? And quite simply, it is your own behavior. So if individuals are self-aware, or if individuals have a better way of assessing the behavior of the people around them, whether it is their teams, or whether it is their customers, whether it is their line managers, or whether it is their senior management teams, they'll be able to build better relationships by identifying what is an effective mode of communication. It will allow them to make a better use of their teams. It can help to mitigate or manage conflicts, in terms of achieving that success. And it is a key factor when we look at it in terms of, what is the most important capability that builds leaders, and it is self-awareness. We often talk about, being great team players, having that skill set where we can go and fit in the team. But in order for us to mold ourselves, so whether you're playing a T20 match, whether you're playing a one day, or whether you're playing a test match, in order for you to fit into all those formats, you should know how you're going to tweak your mindset. You should know how you're going to tweak your aptitude or your temperament. And even before you do that, you need to be able to say, what is your starting point? If you are naturally a person who is aggressive, you would need to understand to say, okay, how am I going to tone it down in a particular situation and then apply it in that situation? So a lot of times people tend to focus on the action items without really going to the core to say that, okay, look, where am I, really starting out from? How do I identify that this is the level of training, or this is the level of support that I'm going to see how it works for us in behaviors as well. So that iceberg that I was talking to you about earlier, where we talk about the observed behaviors, our brain often looks at what it sees as observed behavior, and then it goes on to make a judgment about the person. And essentially what happens is, and that's why we come up with phrases like, first impressions last, and first impressions are important, because when your brain has seen someone and they've formed an impression, they're more likely to carry that through. And that's why when you see candidates at appraisals or at interviews, they're all dressed very sharply, they all present themselves very strongly, they're dressing for success, as the phrase goes. But over a period of time, 6 months or 9 months, you tend to realize that maybe your initial assessments weren't all that great, or they weren't on point, right? So imagine the time when you first, started your job at the moment, or you went to college, or, you were at a technical program. Very often the first person that you would have met on the first day, there is a lesser probability that you've actually built on that relationship over a period of time. Your preferences of your best friends will change from the first day going forward. And, there could be some people at work that you may not really relate to in the first instance, but then you start building a relationship with them and you really respect, the way they are actually working through and all the rest of it. So what really happens is that, we see the world the way we want it to be. And it's not necessary that the world is actually the same way, kind of like this Mona Lisa painting. And again, when you look at the behaviors as well, we don't have the same behavior in all scenarios. So when you're interacting with someone in one particular scenario, we tend to make a judgment to say that, okay, this is what this kind of a person is. But that person is not always extroverted, they're not always introverted, they're not always intuitive, they're not always judgmental, because you've seen it yourself that you're not the same person in different scenarios. So what we need to move away from is to say that, when we are interacting with people, how do we have that ability to say that I'm not going to label someone, I'm not going to kind of, say that, okay, this is what this person is. So this person is always an extrovert or is always an introvert. But what I'm going to do is to decide that, that behavior will have a range. So even if you look at your 4 common behaviors in the 4 situations, maybe you will see a link in terms of the type of behavior. Some of you may have said that you are supporting in one scenario, but you're caring in another scenario. And they have kind of similar traits when you look at it, if they're not kind of, completely different as well, right? So it's very important that we understand what makes us who we are, okay? So till the 1950s, the initial thought was that, we are the way we're born. So whatever is our genetic self that we inherit, this is what we are going to, this is what we have as a behavior. But then we've learned that, we can develop a behavior. So that's why when you go to learn something, when you go on a course, when you pick up a degree, when you get certified on something, you learn a different way of doing it. So you develop a particular behavior. And essentially then what happens is we also have a context for our behavior, right? The way we respond to situations. So for instance, we know that there is, a kind of a caveat, or there's a clear rule which says that, one should not lie. Okay. There are no conditions applied to it. There are no situations to it. The commandment does pretty much say that, you're not supposed to do this. Okay. But what we do is we create a context for ourselves in the way we respond. So, we find it okay to lie for someone who's really close to us. We may not lie for somebody that you're not very close to. There could be certain situations where you're okay with little white lies. There could be certain situations where you would say that it's okay to kind of, fudge things a little bit when you're going to talk about it, because the greater interest is being served by it. So all of that is contextual. So what we do is we are looking at kind of, adapting that scenario. So when you say a developed behavior is when you learn something, all right? So for instance, if I was going to a finishing school and I learn how to use silverware to eat my meals, okay? So then when I start using cutlery for my meals, that's a developed behavior, okay? But where I have grown up, the family that I come from and everything else, everybody's used to eating with their hands, okay? So for a longest part in my life, that used to be the scenario. Okay, then I went to finishing school and I learned this new behavior to say that I should be using cutlery. Okay, a contextual behavior is depending on my environment, I may choose to deploy that behavior or I may choose not to. So if I go back to my village and if I'm sitting with the people that are from my village, I'm not going to ask for cutlery at that stage. Okay, even though I've learned that this is how I'm supposed to do it and all the rest of it. Similarly, when I'm at a fine dining restaurant with clients, I'm less likely to be using my hands to eat a meal because it is not appropriate for that context. So the difference between developed behavior and contextual behavior is when you learn something, when you learn a particular way of doing something or saying something or behaving in a certain way, which is essentially what training and development is all about, right? You learn and you develop a behavior because that's what your training has taught you, that this is how you're supposed to react in a situation. A contextual behavior is when you take a call to say that, is it appropriate for me to deploy that behavior right now? Or is it not going to be relevant? Okay, so that's a choice that you're looking at making, right? Now, what we're able to do is, and the way the technology has evolved for us is, today we have access to technology which looks at imaging for the human brain. Okay, we're able to use fMRIs, we're able to use PET scans, QEG scans as well, to actually identify how our brain is functioning when it is carrying out a particular task. So what you see on your screen, the scale on the right-hand side is the blue part of it is the one which shows where there is no activity or, which is happening. The yellow and the red is where there's too much activity happening in the brain. And given the imaging technology that we have right now, we're now able to isolate parts of the brain which are actually responsible for carrying out certain tasks, right? And this is something that we did not have available 20, 30 years ago. We were not able to look at the insides of a brain when a person was alive, because that's not legal. And when someone, passed away, then the lights have gone out, so to speak. So there's nothing that you'll be able to observe. But over the last 30, 40 years, given the advances in imaging technology, we're now able to isolate and see, okay, this is where certain activities happen. And if you look at it, what we've been able to find out is that your brain gets divided into two halves, which is what we are all aware about, that there's a left hemisphere and there's a right hemisphere. What a lot of people are not aware of is that there's another line which divides your brain into the front and the rear as well. Okay. Now, this is not a pronounced line like the first one. The first one with the left and the right, there are two different hemispheres. Create that distinction, right? And what we were able to ascertain using the same imaging technology is that each part of the brain is hardwired for a certain function, is hardwired for a certain behavior, okay? Now, this is something which is proved in, or which is taken in from using neuroscience as a base, and a lot of studies and everything have gone into it to kind of, ascertain these parts. And what the behaviorologists and the neuroscientists have done is they've built on this knowledge to identify which part of the brain does what, okay, which part of the brain is hardwired for a particular task or for a particular activity, okay. In fact, technology is evolving at a stage where we're now talking about getting brain scans, okay. So just like you saw the images a few slides ago, which talked about, how different parts of the brain were functioning, you could in essence have a brain scan, which could talk about, how your brain has got a certain pathway which is developed, because your skills are mapped to those parts of the brain. So it's like a road that you're using. If you use a particular path in a forest, and if it's used by a lot of people, then you will see that it's a well-tread path. And there could be other areas which are not in use as much, and they're not as well defined. The same thing is what happens to our brain, and that's a fascinating concept called as neuroplasticity, which is something that we cover a lot in our certification programs. But it is fascinating to get that insight to say that the more you use a certain part of your brain, you will see well-developed reflexes on those parts or those measures, and those actions will come a lot more easily to you as an individual. So that's the technology that we're actually looking at, where we're actually aiming for. So again, I've got a couple of participants wanting to ask questions. Feel free to pop in your questions in the Q&A box. We'll probably take that up towards the end of the session. Yeah, super. Right. So that is kind of leading us to what we talk about, with the relevance of PRISM. So what PRISM Brain Mapping has essentially done is it's taken in all that awareness which has been developed, using neuroscience, and the team at PRISM Brain Mapping Worldwide, which is called as the Center for Applied Neuroscience, and they're based in the UK. What they've done is they've taken all of that into account. They've used an original model, which is basically the four-dimensional model of the human brain, which was developed by the American Medical Association in the 80s. And they've built this learnings to simplify that, okay, carrying out tons of research. And that's what's kind of given us the PRISM Brain Map as we know right now. Okay, so it's a tool which has been developed and launched in 2002 after tons of studies that were done on the original model that comes in from the American Medical Association. So what it does is it takes the theories around what we know about the brain, which part of the brain is hardwired for what kind of technology and all, for what kind of behavior. And then it kind of builds into the behavioral models to come up with the tool as we know right now. Okay. And these are some of the clients who are using PRISM globally right now. And again, one of the things that you can watch from this is that, it is not specific to a certain sector. So it's a tool that gets used across different sectors, from FMCG to banking, to consulting, to finance, to industries even, and in those application areas, in the education stream as well. And in India, where we've launched this, in 2010, so we've been present here since 2010. These are some of the clients that we've worked with, and we continue to do work with, on different areas. So again, the same spread in terms of sectors, to say that it is not unique to one particular sector, it is not unique to one particular industry, kind of a thing. And despite the diversity that we're working with, the key strength of the tool comes in the fact that, what is consistency. So according to the British Psychological Society, any tool that you use for behavior profiling should have a score of about 0.7 on the Cronbach's alpha. Now, these are all independent studies that are done by researchers from around the world. So they will take in a bouquet of tools, they will do their studies, and they will publish these reports. So these are not necessarily company-funded research, which kind of comes out, but this is all independent research. And on those research reports, with the most recent one being done in 2018, PRISM has a score of 0.9, 0.95 on the consistency scale, which means that when you're using the tool, it has 90 to 95% accuracy in terms of the output that you will get. And our clients use PRISM in a variety of areas. We primarily use it around recruitment, team building, leadership development, even in sales training, or even in regular training, for behavioral side, 360-degree feedback. So clearly it is a tool which has multiple applications. So you could use the same report, you can get multiple feedback on from a single report, and you could deploy it in a variety of areas. Now, what makes PRISM unique, and what you're seeing on your screen, and it probably resonates with the brain imaging that you saw a while ago. What you see on your center is basically a metaphor for the human brain. And you'll see the left side of your brain, which is with gold and red. You'll see the right side of your brain, which is the green and the blue behavior preference. And then you have the front, which is the gold and the green, and the rear of the brain. So if you look at your brain with a top view, we're able to kind of, get an idea, in terms of the behavior preferences. Now, what you were able to get, and the value that PRISM drives, is it creates awareness. Okay, so when you pay attention to what your behavior preference is, and when you try and map that with a situation, and you say that, look, am I getting the results that I want? You'll be able to figure out to say that, okay, is your behavior helping you, or is it hurting you in this situation? And what is it that you need to then do to try and fix this? So rather than just identifying a training need and saying that, okay, this is what we think the training need is based on the observed behavior, a PRISM Brain Map allows you to dig a bit more detail, okay? Because the belief is that the attention that you pay to a particular behavior will drive that particular trait, or will drive that particular action. It's kind of the same thing, when we talk about, getting fit, when we talk about weight loss, when we start paying attention to a diet, when we start paying attention to our workout regimen, when we start paying attention to the other bits in terms of, not eating the junk foods and all the rest of it, or having an active lifestyle, we're able to make a sustainable change in our fitness, okay, that comes through over a period of time, right? Same happens with our behavior. Our behavior does not change overnight. And that's essentially, when you observe when people go on a training and development program, if they're back in on a training and development program, you see that, there's a greater effectiveness in the first week when people are back, because the knowledge is still fresh and they're paying attention to that. But if the environment is not conducive, if they're not able to kind of repeatedly do that, you will see that the training effectiveness fades over a period of time. and you know, people tend to lose out on stuff that at some stage they had a very good handle on. Okay, and that's the same with behaviors. So what PRISM does is it creates the awareness on the candidates, it creates that focus using an objective platform. Okay, so for instance, when you look at a PRISM brain map, you not only get a candidate's underlying behavior preference, so what is it that they are hardwired for, where is it that they have a higher preference on, but you also get their adapted behavior preference. So, you know, where is it that they're tweaking their behavior at the moment, depending on their situation, depending on their environment, depending on, you know, their current needs, even at this point in time. And what you're able to do is you're able to map this against a benchmark. So when a person is particularly performing a job, what is the behavior preference for that job? Okay. Now, essentially, whenever we talk about behaviors, the language is often very subjective. Okay. So what's good behavior for me may not be good behavior for you, and vice versa. So what happens is, even when you are giving someone feedback about behavior, you might come at it from a very different perspective. So, you know, we had one of our clients, you know, they had a management team that was based out in the US, and they had the delivery team that was based in India. And when we went in on the intervention, we saw that there was a lot of variance in the communication, not because they had any, you know, any different intentions or anything on those lines, but it was just the mindset that they came in, or the preference of the language, right? So the management team in the US, you know, they looked at aggression as a very favorable term. So whenever they had to give feedback to someone, they would rate them on those parameters, because based on their culture, based on their awareness, you know, they looked at that as a very positive trait. Whereas from the delivery team's perspective, because they had a different background, they had a different cultural perspective, they had a different mindset where they came in from, the focus was more on getting things right and being right most of the time, rather than trying to compete and saying that we want to be first and make mistakes, right? And again, this was a classic example of best laid plans, you know, so none of the teams had any, you know, different intentions to kind of, you know, create conflict. But with the way they saw the situation from their perspective, it's like the Mona Lisa. The way they saw the situation from their prism differed to the way that the other team was looking at it. And all it needed was a little bit of an adjustment on both sides so that they could form an effective bridge. They could adapt their communication. But we could not identify those steps if we did not know where they were focused. But once we were able to demonstrate to both of those teams where their focus areas lay, where their higher behavior preferences lay, it was easier to identify situations. It was easier to identify the occasions where they had to tweak it and by how much they had to tweak it. So what PRISM does is it gives you a platform to neutralize those preconceived ideas, to neutralize that preconceived knowledge areas, and to build on a common platform. Because regardless of what your background is, whether you've been educated at the IIMs, or whether you have a degree from Harvard, or whether you've been to a local business school, when you take a PRISM inventory, the other person is also taking the inventory and interpreting it exactly in the same context. So there's no variance. We tend to neutralize any previous experiences, any kind of you know, developments that an individual would have, and we're able to kind of bring everybody on an even platform. So what essentially PRISM does is it helps to individuals to understand what, you know, are their key behavior preferences, how likely are they, or, you know, what is the key driver for them when they are performing a certain role, what is their leadership style, what's the communication style, so you can get all of that input coming out from it. It allows them to understand how they're going to get on with other people. Okay, so you can actually predict, you can actually look at saying that, okay, this is how this person is likely to behave in this particular scenario. And it's able to make that, you know, make that difference based on an objective platform. So it's no longer about my skill set, or it's no longer about my knowledge of you know, having, you know, worked in a different industry or having a multinational experience. But anybody can do that. Even a first-time manager can do that. Even somebody who's not got management experience can still use the tool to get that benefit to understand not only their own behavior, but also identify the behaviors of the people around them. This could be their team members, this could be their line managers, this could be their customers that they're meeting for the first time. Because once they identify that behavior, where the other person's coming in from, they can adapt their own behavior style. So then you're not using the same thing in all scenarios, but you're learning to identify the scenario and then tweak your behavior, even if you're interacting socially with your friends or with your partners as well. And that is one of the stronger suites in terms of what the program comes from. So we're able to create an environment that helps us to be more successful. So we understand that, okay, if there is a gap in a particular behavior or in a particular method, what am I required to do? So a lot of times when we look at traditional behavior tools, they're either looking at labeling individuals to say that this is who you are, this is what you are doing, but it doesn't account for the variance in that behavior. Like we said with the first exercise, you're not the same person in all the 4 scenarios. So if you had taken a tool which then put a label on you to say that this is who you are, it then becomes a disabling factor. It doesn't enable you to drive success, right? And here's the interesting bit from a company's perspective. Only about 50% of mid to large companies are currently using any kind of psychometric instruments, right? And a strong majority, and this is despite the pandemic, a strong majority of the companies are looking at bringing in the use of such instruments to help to crystallize their understanding of the behaviors, to have some kind of a framework that they can work with. And what we've been able to do in our journey over the last 10 years, we've built up a roster of almost 300 plus companies in India and in South Asia that use PRISM Brain Map. We have plans which start for an unlimited usage from as low as less than 10,000 rupees a month. We've used PRISM with a fair degree of success with academic institutions. We have almost 750 practitioners. These are employees within companies who are using PRISM for their company. So these are ideally HR managers, L&D managers, L&D heads, or even line managers who've been certified on the tool. And we have a network of about 80 odd practitioners right now. And we run open programs from time to time to build on on these networks so that they can service some of the other clients that are there. We've recently launched in this year, we've launched a new certification program which is delivered directly by PRISM Brain Mapping UK. And it's an international certification that gets used or can be deployed anywhere around the world. So, you don't have a regional jurisdiction to say that, your license is going to be valid only in one particular area. So that's essentially, the overview on the tool and the gap why we have introduced this. So, it started off with that understanding to say that, look, there is a gap on having an objective awareness tool, which can help to neutralize some of these languages, issues, and all the rest of it, their subjectivity on there. So when we look at what makes us different, and by no means are we saying that PRISM is the holy grail and this is the only thing that allows you to get there. But PRISM is definitely one of the most user-friendly instruments. It is cost-effective. It is available in regional languages. So it's available at the moment in Hindi, Marathi, Bengali, and Gujarati even. So it's been tailor-made to be used in regional languages. You can use the same framework for employees at a junior level, for mid-level, as well as for the senior level. So what we're able to drive with PRISM is that the language of behaviors, of preferences, of what the management wants to convey to the employees and vice versa can be crystallized all across. So it's uniform. So there's no distinction across based on level or reach or expertise kind of a thing. So it brings that consistency in the organization. What PRISM also offers is the integration with the existing HR system. So if you have an HRIS or you have an HR you can also get the behavioral input so that managers can make an informed choice to say that, okay, is this performance despite that particular behavior, or is it due to that particular behavior preference? So what separates PRISM from kind of the other tools which are there right now is the fact that, it has a higher reliability score, it's more cost effective, it's easy to get a handle on, there's no expensive installation, and you get a lifetime access to the tool. So if you are certified, or if you've taken a brain map report, or if you have access to the system and the learning and the knowledge which gets uploaded on the platform, you continue to have access. It's not a question which says that your access is going to get timed out or anything. And it's a simple web-based intervention. So, you just need online internet access to be able to use the tool, to be able to access your reports. And you can download a lot of stuff, from the online center. So the utility for PRISM comes in on the other traits that we offer, which is in terms of the user friendliness, the cost effectiveness, the diversity of applications, and the ability to be able to use that in different environments. And the level of customization is just amazing, right? So that was kind of a quick insight into the tool, and I'm just a bit conscious that we're coming on towards the the end timing for the program. So would like to take in a few questions at this stage. We've got a few already that the delegates asked. So we're going to address that. So we had one question on, how does the tool differ from Pearson's and other psychometric assessments in the market? So we've already answered that. Like we said, it's not only one factor, it's the holistic thing. For most of our clients who used to use another tool, whether it's be an MBTI or a HBTI or anything on those lines, the difference comes in terms of the application to use it at a wider audience. The cost effectiveness, as I said, it starts from as low as less than 10,000 rupees a month, for an unlimited usage. So that's there. The ease of use and the diversity of application areas, that's really great, which is what kind of comes through. Right, I have another question in here which talks about how is the tool administered? Well, as we said, it is an online tool. You need to have access to the internet. You can go online, and at the moment it is a series of descriptors. You respond to the descriptors, and the report is generated. Got another question in here which says, how does this differ from the fingerprint tool? Well, the fingerprint tool, I'm assuming that you are, you're talking about the multiple intelligence, tool, DMIT. I think is what you're referring to, where you take in a scan of the fingerprints and you get the reports. Well, primarily, PRISM does not use any biometric data, so there is no data privacy concerns or anything on those lines. It is still very unique in the sense that, when individuals are taking an inventory, there's enough variety in there to get, get a good read in terms of the behavior preference. Unlike the DMIT tool, which can take you up to 2 days or 3 days to get a report back in, in PRISM, the reports are generated instantly, to kind of, get that feedback. So that's another plus around that. Right. So which are the countries that PRISM gets used in is another question. So PRISM is used in about 26 odd countries at the moment. We're adding more and more countries as we kind of go along. And yeah, I mean, the idea is to build on our presence as we scale up. I've got one last question from Nihar. Says that, what will be the duration and the cost for being certified as a practitioner? Well, the different levels in terms of getting certified as a practitioner. From a South Asia and an India perspective, we're offering a reduced fee at the moment. It's at about 45,000 rupees plus taxes. And what we're also doing is, for all the participants on the program, we're offering PRISM credits complementary to the value of the certification. So in essence, when you take a certification, you don't have to buy any extra credits to get you started. You're going to get credits worth the value of 45,000 plus taxes or whatever it is that you are, paying in. And we have regular alerts that go out to individuals. So there are early bird registrations, last minute pricing as well they could benefit from. We will be sharing the information about our next program and the costs on there as well when you get a mailer from us. Excellent. So I think that covers us up on this. That's about all the time that we've had. If I haven't been able to take your question, or if you're thinking of another question, you've got the email address on your screen, info@prism links, and your map reports along with the debrief with you. So thank you very much again. That's it from my side. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.